Hello, good morning, good evening, good afternoon, good insert your relevant time zone. We are live for another Tech Off Topic. That wonderful podcast where we talk random junk around tech, go tangential, come back to the original topic, and then say goodbye. This week, I have the pleasure of inviting somebody who happens to have worked in the same place as me just after I did. So I get to ask a few questions about that stuff, as well as he is in a very interesting industry at the moment. So I'm going to drag in Matt and let him introduce himself. Hello, Matt.
Hello. Hi, everyone. How you doing there?
The world is quiet today, but that's them's the breaks.
Yep.
So feel free to introduce yourself so that everybody knows who the heck you are and what the heck you do.
Sure. So my name's Matt Hamilton. I'm currently the Director of Developer Relations at a company called Ripple. It's a fintech company based in the US, headquartered in San Francisco, although I'm based here in the lovely, slightly damp UK. And yes, as you kind of mentioned at the start there, we both worked at IBM at slightly different times. So I was a developer advocate at IBM just before joining Ripple. I've been at Ripple now for about 2 months, but I've been involved in the XRP community. XRP is something we're going to talk about, the XRP ledger. And I've been involved with XRP for the last sort of 4 years or so, in the XRP community for about 4 years.
There we go. Now I've fixed my audio. One thing I always forget to check at the beginning because it seems to work, and it's because I have multiple microphones on this damn machine.
Yeah, I've done the same thing, kind of gone live, and it's decided to pick up the speakers and use them as a microphone for some reason or something like that.
Oh, technology, what a boon. You joined a few months after I left IBM, not very long afterwards. I'm going to ask, did you join as part of the Cloudant DB side of things or part of the Watson data platform and all the blockchain crap that IBM was trying to sell?
No, I was part of Cloudant. So this is the link between Cy Metzen, myself, and you, I believe. So I joined as part of, actually not Cloudant, but Compose, which was a sister kind of division within IBM. Compose was an acquisition that IBM acquired, originally called Mongo HQ, and they were like a MongoDB in the cloud provider, and then they branched out and started doing all sorts of other databases, and then got acquired by IBM, and they hosted about sort of 12, I think it was, databases, open source databases. So everything, Postgres, Redis, etcd, sort of database-like things like Elasticsearch and stuff like that. In the cloud.
Between that and some cheapy containers, you could do a lot of damage. And by damage, I mean build some really random stuff, because I did.
Yeah. So what was amazing was that Compose had built an entire kind of orchestration containerization system for databases many years ago, before they got acquired by IBM. And it was a thing called Gru, as a reference to Despicable Me. Gru and the little workers were called minions, and that kind of orchestrated their whole platform. It was built on LXC on Linux still, and kind of did everything that the likes of, say, Kubernetes does before Kubernetes kind of existed. And they had a whole sort of database orchestration system, and then they kind of started to, when they got bought by IBM. They then sort of went through a tech kind of refresh, move on, whatever you want to call it, the next generation. And so started to move it onto Kubernetes and onto IBM's Kubernetes service. So I was there for about 2 years in that division, kind of working in the infrastructure team, EU infrastructure team. And then I switched over to developer advocacy and was normally a part of the what's called the London City team. And I was working for them, meant to be going to meetups and events and all this kind of stuff. But I started literally in March. I went to the London office once. I went up there on the train. I'd even bought myself a nice new backpack for like carting stuff up and down to London, because it was like, I'm going to go up to London every day, every week. So I bought myself a nice like secure backpack with a kind of hidden compartment in, you can't open it and get pickpocketed and all this kind of stuff. I got all of this like ready. I was like, right, start this new thing. And I went up there once, and then lockdown kicked in, and that was the end of that. And so by the time I left, just almost exactly a year later, I still hadn't met some of the people I worked with kind of in that year. Still hadn't met some of them face to face from the London team.
Oh Lord, I know how that feels. Yeah, I did very much so. I started my last job in the February, went over for a week of onboarding, met half the people I needed to meet because the other half were the US. Went to my first event, got COVID at the event.
Right.
So I know exactly how you feel.
Yeah.
Okay, so that means how long have you been working at as head of DevRel for Ripple Dev?
2 months.
2 months.
Oh, not even. Actually, no, not even 2 months. No. When did I start? Start of February. So 2 months.
2 months. Now I'm just trying to work out so I understand how the logical career progression goes from advocate to head of department of advocacy. That bit makes complete sense. How do you go from being somebody interested in, because you said you're interested in and have been in and around the Ripple and the XRP community for 4 years. How does that marry up? Because normally the crypto people are crypto people and they're not exactly engineers.
Okay, so what happened was, so I was working for a startup based in LA remotely that were making a health and fitness and nutrition tracking app. I was working for them for a couple of years, actually leading their mobile app development team. So leading their iOS and Android team, building that. And they then all of a sudden, one November Thanksgiving weekend, pulled the plug. They'd run out of money, and that was it. Kind of everybody off. Sorry. So that kind of came to an end quite quickly. So whilst I was looking around for like the next thing to do, I wanted to kind of try and hone my skills a little bit. And I'd always avoided JavaScript since like the very early web days of JavaScript. And I've been a Python programmer for sort of 20 odd years. Generally disliked JavaScript, and I thought, okay, well, let's try this Node.js thing, this newfangled Node.js thing. Come on, granddad, let's get with the picture here and try it out. And so I started playing around with it, and I was like, okay, I want to learn sort of async programming, and my choice was I narrowed it down to, okay, I'm either going to use Node.js or I'll use Swift and PromiseKit, which is what we've been using in the one of the mobile apps we've been working on. And so I was going to kind of get my feet wet with that and actually dive into that. And I went for Node.js. And as it happened, one of my former colleagues, Scott, had given me some XRP, some cryptocurrency, kind of as a thank you for letting him mine Bitcoin in the office. And he was
that
like,
sounds dodgy as heck.
Yeah. But we got free electricity, and he was kind of running. This is kind of before mining rigs became huge country dominating huge great big things. But anyway, he used to mine Bitcoin, and then with all of the successive kind of iterations of everything trying to get faster and faster and trying to keep up with that, he decided that this was a fool's game. Kind of got out of that. Sold his Bitcoin, bought XRP, and anyway, he gave me a little bit of XRP and said, it's not worth anything. Maybe one day it'll be worth enough to put a deposit on a car. Anyway, I kind of remembered this, and had looked up and seen that Ripple had produced a library called RippleLib to access the XRP ledger via JavaScript. Mm-hmm. And so I thought, okay, well, this is my chance to kind of have a play around with this, Node.js stuff. And so I was like, okay, and I discovered that within the XRP ledger, it's got a built-in decentralized exchange. You can actually buy and sell currencies on the decentralized exchange built into the blockchain. Now, this time I didn't really know a huge amount about blockchains. I knew what Bitcoin was. I knew roughly how proof of work worked. I kind of knew a bit about Bitcoin at that point. XRP was kind of new to me. The concept of a decentralized exchange, I didn't kind of really get. But on the other hand, I didn't not get, because it's kind of like when you have a little kid and they don't know what you can't do, they just go ahead and do it. I was just like, okay, decentralized exchange, great, fine. And didn't sort of realize necessarily the significance of kind of what that was within the XRP ledger. But I was able to buy and sell euros and dollars and yen, Bitcoin, Ethereum, etc., XRP, on this decentralized exchange, programmatically. And so I started writing something to try and buy and sell. And I was like, okay, well, maybe this would make money. This is at the sort of tail end of 2017, and XRP, the price of XRP had shot up to near its all-time high. Bitcoin was rocketing up as well. And this thing was starting to do quite well, actually, and actually make money. And my thinking was, well, do I need to actually go and get a job, or can I just let this thing make money and I'm just going to go and retire and sit on a yacht? And anyway, the price then started to come crashing down again. And my wife said to me, well, no, you've kind of got to go and get a proper job. Otherwise, you'll just be sat on the sofa in your pants all day doing nothing, right? So I started looking around, and I actually contacted Ripple. And I wrote to them and said, I've not seen any kind of developer advocacy type efforts you do, or community manager or anything. Would you be interested in hiring for that kind of role? By the way, I'm based all the way over in the UK, but would you be interested in hiring for that role? And I didn't hear anything back from them. I'd actually done quite a lot of that. I'd been sort of, before all of this stuff, I'd worked a lot with an open source community called Plone, which is an open source content management system in Python. People have heard of things like WordPress and Drupal. Plone is very similar to that, but kind of a more sort of enterprise level thing written in Python. And I'd organized conferences, done like dev days, hackathons, all that kind of thing. So the kind of things that developer advocates do, right? Stuff on, help on mailing lists. I'd actually sat on the board of directors of the Plone Foundation. I was actually the president of the Plone Foundation at one point. And so, the idea of this kind of developer advocacy role that I'd started to hear about was like, oh, you can actually get paid to do this kind of stuff. I'd been doing it kind of for free in an open source community, and then I didn't realize it was an actual job. So anyway, I wrote to Ripple. I didn't hear anything back from them. Was wondering, still what to do. And as a chance would have it, I saw a tweet from Simon Metzen saying, hey, we're looking to hire. And funnily enough, I'd met Simon about 10 years prior at a Python conference, EuroPython conference, actually in Birmingham, and started chatting to him there. We're both from Bristol. He was working at the University of Bristol, working at CERN, based at the University of Bristol. And we kind of got chatting over dinner. And we kind of started following each other on Twitter. And randomly, he posted a picture of his local dog walk, and I could see my house in it. And I was like, okay, so clearly we obviously live very near each other as well. Anyway, he posted that they were looking to hire at Compose and at IBM, and I'd never really considered working for a large company. At that time, I'd always worked for startups or worked for my own company. I'd run my own company for about 15 years. A company called NetSite here in Bristol for about 15 years. We're web development agency, and I was at IBM. That's a huge, great big company, but let's give it a shot. My mum had actually worked IBM back in the 60s or 70s, and I'd always said it was a good company. And so I thought, okay, well, I'll give it a shot then. So anyway, I applied and got interviewed by various people at IBM and got the job to work, nothing to do with developer advocacy, but to work on their database team. Lead their EU database team, which was kind of similar to the role I had previously at the startup, which was leading the mobile dev team. This is leading the database engineering team. And so that was kind of the original sort of plan there. Various restructurings happened and things happened and, sort of moved around a little bit there. And then a chance encounter with somebody in the office there, a woman called Marguerite, who's a data scientist, who is a developer advocate.
Marguerite.
Indeed, you probably met Marguerite.
She joined after I did. She joined about 6 months into it, and she came in going, "I'm from academia. I don't get how this company thing works."
Exactly. But anyway, I got chatting to her, and she'd said to me about, hey, there's this DevRel role going on. Would you be interested in it? And I was like, yeah. So that's how I kind of moved from the engineering, the infrastructure team at Cloud or Compose to the UK kind of DevRel team. And I was mainly working on machine learning stuff, and I kind of I had an interest in machine learning, and I kind of got into that. And one of the bits I missed out is when I was writing this like trading bot that was kind of doing stuff on the XRP ledger, I actually then some of the profits of that actually paid for me to do a fintech course at Oxford University, the side business school. And so I went and did that fintech course thinking that, okay, let's maybe go into this as a as a job. And then, like I said, the markets came crashing down. The thing that was making money no longer started making money, and I then joined IBM, worked there for a while. So was happily working there, and then I saw a tweet from somebody who worked at Ripple saying, "Hey, we're looking for a director of developer advocacy." And I sort of vaguely knew them from Twitter. We exchanged a few tweets backwards and forward, and I sort of tweeted back and said, "Well, hey, yeah, but the UK is enough of a basket case. I don't want to move to the US right now." And he replied back saying, "Well, we're an international company and we might hire elsewhere." And I was like, "Oh, okay, interesting." And so started this conversation. This was about, I can't remember now, September time or so in the year. And then kind of the conversations went further, and eventually I ended up working for them this coming the February just passed. So, that
is a rather random route into a job. Was unemployed, decided to play with crypto, got another job, and then randomly ended up back there.
What's strange
because of the hobbies I was doing before all of the jobs.
Yeah, and what is weird is that because I've been quite vocal in the XRP community and quite vocal on places like Twitter and on the message boards and stuff, quite a few people within Ripple knew of me before I joined, and they're like, "Oh, it's great you're coming and joining us." And it was kind of this sort of strange feeling kind of coming in there to see what was going on, and there'd actually been like I found some documents about people in the industry that know what they're talking about. My name was on it actually, which was quite weird to see. Kind of seeing that, I was like, "Oh, okay, cool."
That's got to be a little bit meta before you.
It is a bit meta, yeah. It was a bit meta. It was both flattering and disconcerting at the same time.
Ooh. Okay, I'm going to ask a question now because you put this one at the top, and I was actually looking at the question and going, I actually don't know, because you've put in the question difference between Ripple and the XRP ledger.
Yeah.
So I know XRP is the short form name representation for the currency itself, the actual coin token. Well, is it called a coin or a token in Ripple land?
Probably I'd say a coin.
Okay. And I know what a ledger is from the principle of how the ledger works is the means of record for all, well, not all, but most blockchain technologies.
Right.
But that's the point. What the heck is the difference between Ripple? I thought XRP was Ripple.
So it's a little bit confusing because things have changed name over the time, and it can be a little confusing. The general accepted kind of usage at the moment is Ripple is the name of the company, and the XRP ledger is the open source ledger that they use. So it's a bit like if you think of you have, say, Red Hat or IBM as the company, and you have Red Hat Enterprise Linux or Linux as the kind of product, the open source product.
Right. So it's Ripple more like is a company open core principle.
Yeah, kind of exactly, sort of open core principle. Now, the original creators of the XRP ledger went on to form the company Ripple. So it's created originally, kind of got all up and running, and then they were like, okay, well, let's form a company. So which is the odd thing being is that's a very, very typical story in tech, right? And I imagine it was probably the same thing that started companies like, I don't know, Elastic, that happened to have, Elastic and Elasticsearch, the product, right? There's two things that are kind of named the same, but one is a company, one is a product. And I imagine, I don't actually know the history of it, but I'd imagine that they kind of built something because, well, this was cool, and then built a company to kind of offer services around that as a monetization model. And that's kind of
what... And the others did that as well, didn't they?
Which one?
HashiCorp.
Yeah, exactly.
Controls, and then went, oh, we now need a mechanism to actually manage and control and pay for everything.
Yeah, Mongo as well. I think probably a similar thing. There's a lot, especially within the databases type industry, there's people will generate a piece of software and then they will create a company to provide services around that, so development services, professional services, support, etc., around it. So that's kind of a similar model. They created this thing called the XRP ledger that they got up and running, which is this decentralized blockchain, and then they created a company. Now, where it differs slightly from, say, a database company is there is a currency involved, right? And so when the XRP ledger was created by the original founders, there was 100 billion XRP nominally created, and it was almost an arbitrary number. I mean, it was picked to be not too small, not too big in the grand scheme of the world, and representable in a 64-bit integer, and things like that. But it was sort of a nominal amount, right? Because it had no value. Right, Bitcoin was a year or two old, probably worth about $1 at the time. These developers were Bitcoin developers that created the XRP ledger. They originally had worked on Bitcoin and contributed to Bitcoin Core and early kind of Bitcoiners, and they kind of created this thing. And there was this bunch of XRP that wasn't really worth anything. And actually, the what's called the Genesis wallet, where it was created, was open, and anybody could take some XRP from it, because
what?
Well, it wasn't worth anything. So if you think back in the time now, why would if you suddenly create a Mike token or something and create a cryptocurrency called Mike, and it's off the top of the bat, it's not worth anything, right? So why wouldn't you give me 1,000 Mike or 10,000 Mike or 100,000 Mike? If they're not worth anything, then 10 is worth the same as 100 is worth the same as 1,000, right?
Hang on, does that mean it was crypto swag?
Yeah, effectively. Effectively. And so it was anybody could take it. And so they took a large proportion, about 80% of it, 80 billion XRP, to put into, they handed over to this company to then kind of monetize and help build some kind of commercial case around it, and kind of build an ecosystem, help build an ecosystem. And kind of it grew from there, really. And so Ripple is now about 500 employee company that deal a lot with financial services. So they kind of pivoted a number of years back. Originally, the idea was that it would be direct person-to-person transactions, and people would make payments directly to each other. Then for various reasons, they switched over to working with banks, and instead of working at the effectively the user interface layer, let's go down to the lower levels, right? Rather than trying to get you to use this new thing called cryptocurrency, let's instead get your bank to be able to use it, and then you just continue using your standard means of payment. And behind the scenes, hopefully things then go a bit quicker and a bit smoother using that. So that's kind of what Ripple were working on specifically. International remittances, international bank transfers, because these things take 3 to 7 days, cost you a pretty penny. If you've ever done something like any large transaction, like buy a house overseas or some property or anything like that, then you're looking at hundreds, possibly thousands of pounds just in bank fees.
There are reasons services like TransferWise exist.
Yeah, exactly. And TransferWise didn't exist back then, right? And so they kind of built Ripple started to build a system to help transfer value backwards and forwards, because it was this kind of the CEO, now CEO Brad Garlinghouse, kind of has this kind of famous sort of phrase in which he sort of talks about that, if you want to get some money from here to Sydney, still the quickest way, COVID withstanding, is withdraw it from the bank, stick it in a suitcase, and fly to Sydney, right, and hand it over. That's still probably the quickest way you're going to transfer money internationally. And so the idea was to kind of let's make it as easy to move money as we can move information, right? We can stream a video from the International Space Station. Yeah, I still can't easily pay you, and you're 100 miles away from me or whatever, right? So that was kind of their goal, was to try and improve international remittances. That was the bit that Ripple were kind of focused on, and using this decentralized ledger XRP as a way of the XRP ledger and XRP as a way to help do that.
Okay, that makes sense. And then you've brought up something which, you've brought up the fact that Ripple had its coins pre-generated. There was a predefined amount, sort of more like a gold standard in normal real world current. Well, technically all currency is freaking digital these days, but In the terms of ye olde definitions, it is a gold standard. There is a set amount. It has a pre-provided value, and you can't overinflate the market by just dumping a whole bunch of extras in.
Well, the value only comes from what people value it as. Like I said, it started with no value because, you know, nobody saw any value of it. And it was only when it started to become sort of tradable on exchanges, and it's now on about 300 or 400 exchanges worldwide that you can trade it, that it started to gain a value, that people started to perceive a value in it. People started to use it for actual real world projects, that it started to actually get a value there. And the reason why Ripple use it is that the current, many people are not quite aware of how international payments work. And it's a kind of a very convoluted system, quite an archaic old system, where if I want to send some money to, say, you know, Australia, then what will generally happen is my bank and the Australian bank will have a relationship, pre-existing relationship, and my bank will have some funds pre-deposited at the Australian bank, and the Australian bank will have some funds pre-deposited at my bank. And so what happens is when I instruct my bank to make a payment to a customer at the Australian bank, what the Australian bank does is they basically move some of that pre-deposited funds from my bank's bank account to the customer's bank account at that end, right? So it's right. And the reason being is because, you know, if you go back to banknotes and gold coins and whatever, right, you couldn't just in time move that value, right? So you have to have some prearranged value already there that you can transmit. Now, so every so often that's going to need rebalancing, because the payments that go from the UK to Australia might be different to the payments going the opposite direction. And you have to have enough of a float at either end. If we're talking technical terms, it's kind of like, how much cash do you have? How much buffer do you have at either end, right? What's the buffer space for, you know, and if you're making lots of payments, you possibly need, you know, a larger buffer space because you've got, you know, a large number of payments going through, or they're taking a longer amount of time. You need more buffer space. And the idea of XRP is, for Ripple's use case, is to use XRP to transmit that value instantaneously, right? So rather than have to pre-deposit funds at the other end, then what with Ripple's technology, what it does is the bank in the UK effectively buys XRP dynamically, sends the XRP to Australia, it's sold for Australian dollars, and then deposited at the other end. And all of that happens in under a minute, right? So it's this kind of high-speed way of moving value around using this token as the kind of the bearer of value. That's what they that's what Ripple are using it for.
Okay, that makes sense. It does seem a bit flipped based upon the original arguments for decentralized currency, so Ethereum, Bitcoin, etc., where it's like, we can remove the banking institutions from here, money is now accessible to all.
Yeah.
But I also understand the practical point of, like, this is actually solving a real world problem.
Exactly.
Actually exists not for average people.
Yeah, exactly. And it's not actually, you know, flipping the original theory. I mean, so the whole idea of, okay, let's get rid of the banks and the banking system and replace it with Bitcoin, for example, which is what a lot of like Bitcoin, sort of what are called Bitcoin maximalists, their view is that Bitcoin's the only thing, that's what we're going to use. We're going to, you know, burn the banks and just have Bitcoin, right? Now, a lot of that is a fairly simplistic view, because when you say banks, well, there's all sorts of banks, right? There's the big banks, there's the little banks, there's you know, if you go to buy a house, you're going to probably want a bank or a banking provider or a mortgage provider to lend you some money to buy the house, right? Now, there's going to be
just giving the house.
What's that?
I prefer them just give me the house.
Oh yeah, indeed. And there's financial institutions like that building up in decentralized ways on the blockchain to be able to do that, to do loaning and all this kind of stuff. But the concept of, say, a bank is still going to exist in some form or another, right? I mean, is Coinbase a bank, right? They're an exchange, they're a wallet provider. You know, a lot of people say store their cryptocurrency with them. Is that any different than, you know, storing your pounds sterling at NatWest Bank or whatever, right? So yes, the kind of this utopia that I think, sort of Bitcoin sort of came up with in terms of kind of completely get rid of banks is not very pragmatic. And kind of Ripple's approach was, well, everybody uses banks, so that's where the value is. So let's try and interconnect the banks and everybody else in a much fairer way, right? There's no, some great big bank using the XRP ledger has no greater or lesser authority than me as an individual using the XRP ledger, right? So it's kind of getting them onto the blockchain is not a case of kind of the blockchain kind of bowing to them. It's the other way around. It's them kind of bowing to the rules of the blockchain, so to speak.
Okay. Right, now here's one that I put in that I'm actually curious about, because I don't understand how this applies to Ripple. Right, so everybody in the world is very well aware of what proof of work is, because it's the reason why the news is going crazy over GPU mining, GPU and CPU shortages, primarily GPUs, energy usage in China, and the fact that, 80% of their primary coal usage is being used on crypto currently in any given day.
It's scary figures. I don't know the exact figure of coal usage, but I know it's scary figures, the amount of energy that's used by Bitcoin.
Yeah, and that is all because of the proof of work methodology behind Bitcoin. And proof of stake is different in the fact that you show ownership over an amount of coin already produced. So this is the model that Ethereum is going to next.
Yeah,
their next major version release, they're transitioning it, if I remember correctly. So the coin that has been generated, they're going to stop providing as much value for the work done and the work put into, and so the value of it is the amount you own at that time at the point of transition.
Yep.
But Ripple had all its coin generated up front. At one point, it was given away for free for no apparent reason, as far as I can tell, other than the fact that it existed.
And funnily enough, there is actually a connection to our old employer, IBM. So Ripple and IBM at one point ran a joint project called Computing for Good, and they actually gave away XRP for usage of your CPU in terms of solving problems. So do you remember things like SETI at home and folding at home and all of those kind of services? It was very similar to that. And you actually could get paid XRP for using your CPU, not for mining things like Bitcoin, but for actually doing useful work in trying to find the cure for cancer or whatever it was they were working on, right?
Nice.
So there was actually a connection there, which was quite interesting.
That's actually like, here, have something that doesn't have a huge amount of value, but we're actually giving something back to you for the effort you've put into helping helping the world, for lack of a better word.
Yeah.
So how does the XRP ledger work here?
Yeah, exactly. How do they all work? Okay, so let's rewind a little bit. What is the problem we're trying to solve here, right? So the whole problem that cryptocurrencies try to solve is the ability for two people to transact without the need of a trusted third party, right? So if I send you some value, now remember, this is all digital. So when I send you something, all it is a series of bits. It's ones and zeros that I send you. And that ones and zeros represents the equivalent of a £20 note, right? And I send that to you. How do we ensure that I can't just keep copying that and sending it to everybody, right? Or if I send it to you, you can't copy it and duplicate it and say, hey, look, I've deposited again and again and again and again. And this same £20 note suddenly becomes 20 million, right? How do we solve that problem? Now, typically, the way it's been solved with banking networks is there is a central database, a central ledger that has everybody's balance in, right? So if I make a payment to you, my payment provider, card, wallet app, whatever, contacts us some central database and says, send this amount of money from Matt's account to Mike's account. And then any other transaction will subsequently see that as well on that central database and go, okay, yeah, that I've got £20 less, right? And if I go into I go into a shop with my debit card, I make £100 purchase, I then immediately run next door and make another £100 purchase, right? I can't spend that £100 twice, right? It gets recorded on a central database. It's an atomic operation. If I spend that £100, it's £100 comes off my bank account balance. And if I'm down to zero or down to the bottom of my overdraft or whatever, then I can't spend anymore. That works fine if you've got this central authority that we all trust, the bank, right? Or the central banking network. The idea behind originally with Bitcoin is how can we do this in a peer-to-peer way without relying on a central authority, without having a bank that can deal with it? Because the big problems being is the banks can inflate the money supply, they can seize the money, they can, they're basically in control of it because they're the custodians of your funds. So how can we do this in a peer-to-peer way? And the kind of the innovation within Bitcoin was a thing called proof of work. And the way that proof of work works is you have a chain of the blockchain, a chain of blocks. What it is a set of transactions, and each kind of group of transactions follows the other one and is linked with a hash of the previous one. It's a set of records, each linked to each other in a long linked list. And every 10 minutes, in the case of Bitcoin, roughly average 10 minutes, a new block gets created and added to the end of this list. And with that is added a hash of the previous block that's come before it. So you've got this list in which you can't modify anything in it, because if you do, the hashes would suddenly all become invalid, right?
Yeah.
So the question is, who gets to add to the end of that list? Now, the way that proof of work works, simplifying slightly, is you have a kind of competition. And if you imagine everybody, filling in Sudoku puzzles, right? You give everybody a Sudoku puzzle and you say, okay, you all fill in these Sudoku puzzles, and whoever completes theirs first gets the right to determine which transactions go in the block, right? Mm-hmm. So all the transactions are all broadcast to the network, and then this whoever basically solves this puzzle first gets a chance to look at the backlog of transactions and pick the ones out of it and say that's the next block. Right, and those are the ones that go in there. So because you've only got one entity doing that at a time, whoever won that, competition effectively, that's how you solve the deal with conflicts, because you've got one entity and it's a central entity in a way, but it's a central entity for 10 minutes, and then another one effectively has chosen another one, right? And the way these, solving these puzzles works is they have to complete a algorithmic task. In this case, it's finding a hash finding the input to a hash that produces a particular result. So in the case of blockchain, in the case of Bitcoin, it's like, okay, what input can I give to this hash function that gets me a number that comes out with a certain number of zeros at the start? Right, and you've got to keep trying that. It's a just a repetitive, mundane task that the CPU just goes through, trying every single combination until it finds one that works. Right, and that's how they effectively pick who's going to choose the blocks there. And it has a kind of a side effect in that the hash that links all of those blocks, that the hash that the miners find, is used as part of that. So that that if you were ever to come back to look at the blockchain, that a certain amount of effectively energy has been expended to get it to that point. And if anybody wanted to recreate that, they would have to have expended that amount of energy to have got to that point. And that's a huge amount of energy. That means that it'd be very difficult, if not impossible, to kind of get back to that point. That's proof of work. That's how Bitcoin kind of works, slightly simplified. But as we say, it uses a large amount of energy. The blocks are every 10 minutes. So it means a transaction takes a minimum of 10 minutes. And it's what's called probabilistic settlement, which means with Bitcoin, you can have two people solve this Sudoku puzzle at the same time, right, in different places of the world. And if they both solve it at the same time, they both think they are the one that gets to choose the block. And so they both do. And then all of the other miners see that and build upon the next one. And basically, they keep building until one of them becomes significantly longer than the other one. And there's a rule that says the longest chain is the definitive one. And so any chains that are less than that basically get discarded, and you continue along this longest chain. But what it means is there could be a transaction that's on that shorter chain that you kind of thought was valid, but is overwritten by a transaction on longer chain. So you need to wait a certain number of blocks to kind of be sure that it's not going to be effectively reversed. It's not going to be overwritten. And typically they wait about 6 blocks for Bitcoin. So it's about an hour. So if I make a deposit to say an exchange or a wallet or something, then typically it'll take about an hour before that is deemed to have arrived and be final, and that transaction is final and can't be reversed, right?
Mm-hmm.
XRP, the XRP ledger, very different process.
Now, this is where it's going to get curious.
We're trying to solve the double spend problem, right? We're trying to solve making sure that we can't spend these values twice. Now, actually, that problem becomes a lot easier if everybody on the network can agree the order in which the transactions came in. Because if we say that first £20 I spent you always comes before the second £20, and you can easily say the second £20 is invalid. You've already spent that £20, right? That then solves the double spend problem. Remember, if you think in the real world, if you could simultaneously take your debit card and go to 2 shops and spend it at exactly the same time, which transaction would go through first? And it's only by the fact that there's a central database that you know that the first one spent the £100 that you had in your bank account, so the second one must fail because you've no longer got £100 in your account. You're now down to 0, right? But if you haven't got that central point, how do you determine which transaction went through first? All right, which is the valid transaction? So the idea with the XRP ledger, the revolution is actually really, really simple, deceptively simple, that some people don't, they think it doesn't work because it is so simple. And the simple thing is that if you can just all agree the order, then that's the problem solved, right? The first transaction that goes through is valid. The second one, therefore, must be invalid if you've no longer got any balance left.
Does that mean there's a quorum process, or is it more like a cockroach DB time series sort of approach?
It's effectively a quorum process. So how do you all agree on the order? So what happens is within the network of all of the nodes, so there's say 1,000 nodes on the network worldwide, each node chooses a subset of the nodes called validators that they effectively use as a kind of a jury panel in a way, right? And the nodes on that panel basically come to an agreement with themselves on the order the transactions happened in. And they have what's called an avalanche consensus protocol. So they kind of come up with an idea of the ordering, and they all kind of compare to their neighbors and go, okay, well, everybody else near me thinks it's actually they happened A, B, C, D. I think they happened A, D, C, B. So I'm going to switch to what they say. And you have these several rounds which everybody kind of looks at their neighbors, goes, well, which is the most popular? I'm going to switch to that, until eventually you get everybody on the same page, right? Or at least
a lovely cap theorem problem.
80% of them. A lovely what problem?
Cap theorem problem.
Yeah, but the thing being is you once you've kind of all agreed the order, then effectively the double spend problem goes away, right? And the beauty of it is actually you don't care what the order is. There's no advantage to kind of gaming the system, because you don't care what the order is. You just need it to be consistent, right? If you imagine you and a group of friends are going out for dinner, and you're wandering around, you've just come out the pub, you're all a bit pissed, and you just want you want something to eat, right? And there's 10 of you in this group of mates, and you want to go and get something to eat. You don't necessarily care what it is. You're already, you're a few pints down. You don't really care what it is. You just want nutrition, but you all want to be together. So, half of you says, let's go to Pizza Hut, and the other half says, let's go to McDonald's, right? And you kind of banter between yourselves until eventually you come up with an agreement, say, okay, well, let's all go to McDonald's, right? We don't really care which we go to. We just all want to go together, right? And that's sort of the process that happens with the XRP ledger. And once you agree on that order, then basically the rest of the problem goes away. The one thing that you don't have is you don't have the ability to reward people for doing that process like you do with Bitcoin. So there's no way to distribute the funds. That's why all of the XRP was generated at the start. Whereas with Bitcoin, the miners are rewarded for doing the mining by given effectively new Bitcoin, and there's a release schedule of Bitcoin that happens over time for doing that.
Okay.
If that makes sense.
It does. It does. It's just it's a very different everybody who's aware of crypto is aware of how Bitcoin works. So it's just a very different way of looking at it.
Yeah.
And for me, from my database brain, it's going, all right, core methodology on thousands of nodes. But that explain that.
You don't need
it's
you don't need thousands. You all agree on you agree on a subset of the thousands of nodes. So there might be, say,
how do you
30
then
nodes.
homogenize across the entire ledger? Because even if it's a subset, you then have to homogenize and then homogenize.
Okay, so you need to have an overlap, a minimum overlap between who everybody chooses to use as this subset, right? But the good news being is there's kind of no incentive to be malicious on this.
I don't see,
because
it's more the data method that I'm worried. I'm not worried about the people the currency as it is. It's not worth billions and billions. It's not Elon Musk money.
Well, I mean, XRP could well be. I mean, there's 100 million units there, and they're worth $1 each at the moment, right? So there's $100 billion worth of currency in there. Plus, there's other currencies represented besides XRP on the XRP ledger. There's actually dollars and euros and all sorts of things represented on there as well. So there is a lot of value there.
But I mean, to maliciously go in and monkey around with the data, it would be spotted before it would be of value to the individual monkeying around with the information.
Yeah, and also it doesn't. Okay, so again, you and your mates are stood there. You're trying to decide whether to go to Pizza Hut or whether to go to McDonald's.
Yeah.
Some other random person, the malicious attacker, comes along and starts yelling at you instead to go to Bob's Kebab Shack, right? Now you can choose to listen or you can choose to ignore, right? Now all you want to do is all eat together. So you can just say, well, we're just going to ignore Bob's Kebab Shack because we don't care about that. We just all want to eat together. And that's kind of the analogy with the XRP ledger. If a malicious node, all a malicious node could do is try to disrupt coming to a consensus in the order of transactions. Because you just want consensus. You don't care what the order is. You just want consensus on the order. There's actually no benefit for somebody to say it's one particular order or another. So the only thing a malicious node could do would be to just be indecisive enough that you can't reach quorum on a consensus. And then the simple answer to that is, well, you just ignore them. Right? You just don't listen to them. If they keep voting against the majority consensus, then you can just ignore them. Right? And until you have majority consensus.
Okay, so the conflict resolution model for making the data homogeneous across as much of the ledger as possible is ignore the conflict which is of the least value, the one that doesn't agree with the vast majority of the data.
Pretty much, yeah.
No, that's a really simple way of doing it.
It's deceptively simple, and a lot of
conflict
people
resolution is usually a pain in the butt.
Yeah, and a lot of people think, well, how could this be secure? Because it's so simple. They think, oh well, that's fine. I can just spin up 1,000 nodes, and they can then outvote you. Now the thing being is that you choose who you're listening to, right? If you're stood there with your mates and you want to decide where to go, then you're going to listen to your mates. If 1,000 football fans come wandering past out of the stadium and start yelling Bob's Kebab Shack at you, you'll probably just ignore them because you just want to go where your mates go, right? Yeah. Or worst case scenario is all of you go to Bob's Kebab Shack. Well, so what? You've still fulfilled your goal of eating together, right? So the only thing a disruptive group could do is have half that group shouting Pizza Hut and half shouting McDonald's, such that you can't come to there's so much noise you can't come to a conclusion which to go to. The answer is you just ignore them. You know your mates. Let's listen to your mates. You come to a consensus, and that's where you go.
Okay. All right, I'm going to bring up the conversation from yesterday. So me and Matt had a wee conversation yesterday to double check about today, and because I'm going to be dragging him into another idea later on, which I'm also going to be touching on as well. So you've pointed out before that you got into JavaScript and Node.js because of that's the library that was available to script out and build bots to interact with the ledger.
Yeah.
Now, I checked into the Ripple XDev stream earlier this week, which is really interesting. Your colleague, I've now forgotten her name again. I feel
Mayuka.
bad. Thank you. Did a really, really good job for her first time going live. So, congratulations to her for such a good job. But this is what confused me. This is the first time the Python library had come out.
Yeah.
Now, I'm going to let you explain a little bit more on the Python library, but the first thing I want to ask about is, okay, we both agreed. JavaScript, it's great for hacking things together. You got to admit that. Just gluing stuff together, fantastic. It's kind of really crappy with numbers and higher level mathematics. The sort of thing that when you're working with tiny, tiny fractions of an integer, at which point, why did the Python one come afterwards? What logical reason was JavaScript the first one for doing?
I don't know. I really don't know. So my guess would be that JavaScript being the kind of the de facto standard language for the web, and a lot of exchanges, cryptocurrency exchanges, using JavaScript to provide the functions that they do, that a lot of libraries for cryptocurrency stuff were written in JavaScript. So I think that could be why. And the idea is that, I mean, you can run it in the browser or you can run it on the server, right? So you can use the same Ripple library and actually run it entirely within the browser to connect to the XRP ledger and display stuff as connecting to the on the back end, for example. So you can do that all entirely client side. So I think that's probably why, but I totally agree with you. JavaScript is horrific for numbers. And actually, to be honest with you, whilst Python is generally better, I mean, floating point numbers are a pain in any programming language, right? Because the IEEE standard for floating point numbers means that if you add 0.2 and 0.1 together, you don't get 0.3, you get 0.3000004, right? There's a rounding that naturally happens with floating point numbers. So in actual fact, even within the Python library, we represent most things not as floating point numbers, but we represent them either as strings or strings of a thing called drops. Now, drops are a millionth of an XRP. So with Bitcoin, you have Satoshi, and there's 100 million Satoshi per Bitcoin. With XRP, you have XRP in drops, and there's 1 million drops per XRP. And so what we actually do is we represent most of the numbers as drops, so we can represent them as an integer, and we don't then need a floating point. But still, I think we represent them as strings of integers as well, because when you're sending it via things like JSON and things like that, then things start to go a bit weird. So
when it suddenly starts dropping zeros because this isn't a full integer.
Exactly. You start losing precision and things like that can happen. Yeah.
Oh lordy. Okay, that makes sense. Now your oh my god, it's Mayuka.
Yeah.
She started off the demo going through setting up the test infrastructure and actually creating a test wallet with coins.
Yep.
Now that was oddly named the Faucet. I'm wondering if you know why the naming convention for that.
Cryptocurrency things they've always been called a faucet. So a faucet, for UK viewers, the faucet is the US name for a tap, right? And the idea is that you turn on the tap and out comes water. You turn on the faucet, out comes water. In this case, it's somewhere you can turn it on and you get cryptocurrency that comes out, right?
Turn it on, magical monies appear.
Exactly. Magical money. And so the test net, you have this test network, which is an entirely operational parallel network. But anybody can go on there and just generate a wallet and basically get given a bunch of XRP to use on that. But it's completely parallel to the main network, and so has the XRP on there has no real world value. It's monopoly money, right?
That's what I was curious about. Was the actual test net, is that a scale down? Because obviously it's not going to be running at the same scale as the actual one because it doesn't need that level of redundancy. But is it a actual one-to-one clone functionally of the live currency network?
It is, yeah. There's the testnet, and there's also then a thing called DevNet. And so if you think of testnet as kind of the staging one, and DevNet as your develop branch effectively, right? So testnet almost exactly replicates production in terms of the features that are there and the functionality that's there. The XRP ledger has a process called amendments, in which changes to the protocol and functionality can be voted on by the validators on the network to bring about improvements and enhancements and sort of evolution of the network. And so testnet tries to stay as close as possible to the live network, the production network, in terms of which amendments have been ratified and which are running on the network. So it closely represents it. Whereas the DevNet might have more experimental ones that have been enabled ahead of time to play around with.
Okay. Oh, that's a good question. Oh, so Ripple is the company that oversees XRP as a company.
Right.
And you've just said there's validators. Does that mean there's a governance model like most open source software behind all this?
Yes, but it's a decentralized governance model. So Ripple themselves do not, whilst they are a large participant of the network and of the development, and they employ developers that do the lion's share of the development of code on the XRP ledger, they don't control it and they don't have authority over it. And what's actually happened is, I mentioned there's this amendment process in which what happens is, if you have an enhancement or a change, whatever you want to make that materially affects the network, then you have to basically float it as an amendment on the network, propose it as an amendment on the network. It has to be voted on by the validators. You have to get 80% approval for 2 weeks before it is ratified to go live. And then once that happens, then it is then adopted by the network as a whole. Now, Ripple only have a minority vote on that in that process, right? They only have a small vote, because it's a decentralized network. There's loads of other contributors and participants in the network. So what's actually happened in the past is Ripple have actually voted no on an amendment, and the rest of the community has voted yes, and Ripple have been outvoted. So they genuinely do not control. They genuinely do not control the network, right? Which is an interesting position that I'm in as head of DevRel, and interfacing with people like the product team within Ripple, because the product team within Ripple might say, "Hey, we're going to create this new feature." Now, if you're the product team of Elastic or something like that, Mongo, and you say, right, well, we're going to create this new feature. Well, you create that new feature, and that's the feature that now comes out in version 4.2 of your software, right? Or the next version, and you do a big release party, and you say, hey, look, version 4.2 has come out, and we now have this new feature. Well, Ripple can't really do that, because any new features have to be voted on by the community to go live, and could be vetoed, right? So
that's a lot of
team
putting in engineering and then getting
barred. What they're doing.
Oof.
So they could go ahead and say, "Hey, look, we've got this new feature, da 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 da," and the community could turn around and go, "Nope, we're not accepting it." Right? So it's an interesting position to be in. It really is a symbiotic relationship. Ripple don't have control in the same way that say an enterprise database company might have over a database, for example.
God, yeah, I just can't imagine being a head of product and going, right, here's 3 months worth of work flushed.
yeah, indeed. So but the only way to avoid that scenario is to try and ensure that you're building what the community wants, right? And that is what keeps everything, for want of a better word, honest, right? It's what keeps everything in the interests of the community. In that, if the community don't want that feature, the community will not accept that feature. And like you say, you then 3 months worth of dev work's just been flushed, right? So that's that is the reality of the process.
That means your job is really key here, because you've got to keep a constant level of communication and openness between everybody.
Exactly. So that's kind of my role is as leading the DevRel community side of things is to work with the developers, because a lot of those developers are the ones that are also running the nodes, and say to them, look, ask them, what is it that you want? What is going to make your lives easier? What are we going to do? So I mean, certain things are all to do with client libraries and tooling, and that's all fine, right? But for the actual core protocol, the actual core network, then we have to have agreement with the community. Otherwise, it's just not gonna happen.
Okay, that makes sense. But it also just feels like that is beautiful from an open source standards point of view, but also like, oof.
Yeah, and it's a common misconception. A lot of people think that Ripple control everything, right? Because like I said, there's been naming. Names have changed in the past. So Ripple, the company, was originally called OpenCoin. They then changed to Ripple Labs. The network used to be called Ripple. Then they changed that effectively to the XRP ledger. And XRP, the currency, was previously been called Ripples or Ripple Credits. So some exchanges called it Ripple. And so you can forgive people for having some confusion between the company and the thing, in the same way that, like I said, you might confuse the difference between Elastic, the company, and Elastic, the Elasticsearch, the product. It's so there's some steps in the past that maybe if we had a time machine and gone back, I think maybe could have made different naming decisions there that would have changed it. I mean, ironically, the name Ripple comes actually before Bitcoin. There was a project called Ripple Pay that started in 2004 by a Canadian developer called Ryan Fugger, that was a peer-to-peer credit network. And that was before Bitcoin even existed. And it was the ideas of that peer-to-peer credit network that kind of formed the basis of the decentralized exchange that's built in the XRP ledger. So the XRP ledger has some cool features where I can create and issue my own coin myself, as can you, right? So we can create a Matt token and we can create a Mike token, and we can exchange them on a public exchange on the ledger. And there will be a exchange rate that will be determined by the market as to how much is a Mac coin worth, how much is a Mike coin worth, and we can exchange them. And what's really cool is I can make a payment, and I could say, I want to pay Mike 100 Mike coins, but I'm going to fund this transaction with Matt coins. And as the payment goes through, it will look on the decentralized exchange, find somebody willing to buy and sell them, swap, make the trade, and deliver to you in the currency that you wanted, right?
Good Lord. So it's actually not doing a one-to-one transaction. It's doing a one-to-many transaction. Well, chained transactions.
Chain transaction, exactly. So, you, like I said, you could represent anything on the XRP ledger, right? So originally it was intended to represent euros or dollars or yen or whatever, fiat currencies on the XRP ledger. But it could represent shoes or bananas or coffee or whatever, right? And so you can actually have a transaction that's like, okay, I want to buy a pair of shoes from Mike and I want to pay in coffee. And so I'm going to send 5 kilos of coffee to pay for those shoes. And the network might look in and go, okay, well, we've got nothing on our order books that goes from coffee to shoes, but we've got coffee to XRP, or we've got XRP to shoes. So we're going to actually go from one to another in a single atomic transaction. It basically path finds across the order books and comes out. So it might be that the payment goes coffee to strawberries to oil to Bitcoin to XRP to shoes, right? To get to you.
I love the fact that it's just on. This is like barter trading across the Nile.
Exactly, it is. It's very much like barter trading. It's a bit like there's a service called Hawalas, and it's a bit like that kind of thing. But yeah, barter trading, exactly. And so you can represent anything on the XRP ledger and trade it with anybody. And that's kind of a feature that unfortunately not I don't think enough people are using. But there's some really cool things you could do. Somebody created something that you could represent your time on it, and so it's like 1 hour of mowing your lawn could be traded for X number of hours of cooking or something, right? And you would determine the rate based on the marketplace, right? So you can people can buy and sell and trade hours of something, right? I could buy an hour's worth of lawn mowing, even if I don't have a lawnmower, and sell it again to somebody else, right? I could buy effectively almost like futures contracts of something and buy and sell all these different things on the XRP ledger. So it's pretty advanced. It's pretty cool, the kind of things that you could build on it.
Okay, we're definitely going to be taking advantage of that whilst they're building stuff for the mud then.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, now this is the fun question I wanted to ask, because I want to end on a topic that I actually really like. Now, the fun topic is actually a good representation. So you've been in and around Ripple for 4 years. You've been an active part of the community. You're currently a leader in the community by being the head of DevRel for Ripple. What's some of the worst things you've seen people do to the XRP ledger? As in, like, the ones you're allowed to talk about, of course, like the really bad processes, how people have taken the idea and done something stupid.
So the XRP ledger, one of the things with the XRP ledger is with something like with Bitcoin, for example, each block contains a list of the transactions that happened. Whereas in XRP, each block contains the balances as a result of the transactions. So with Bitcoin, if you want to find out how much money do you have in your wallet, you've got to actually look at all the previous transactions that say, okay, we added 2, we removed 1, we added 0.5, we removed 0.2, and the sum of all of those will be what is your balance, right? Because you add up all the receipts effectively to get to the balance. With the XRP ledger, in each block, it stores the complete state of everybody's account and what the balance is currently right now. So the advantage being is that when you bring a new node onto the network to synchronize, it doesn't have to get the entire history in order to kind of know what the current state is. The current state is always available, so it's much quicker to synchronize. One of the downsides with that, engineering trade-offs, one of the downsides of that means that any new accounts are kind of kept around on each and replicated on each block, right? So with Bitcoin, if nobody made any transactions, the blocks would effectively be empty, and so effectively take 0 storage or close to 0 storage minus the header or whatever, right? But close to 0 storage. Whereas with the XRP ledger, each block would take effectively the same amount because it is the current complete state every single time replicated. So there's more replication, there's more redundancy there, but it means that there's also potential for more bloat. Now, somebody came up with an idea of using the XRP ledger as a chat mechanism and using the memo field in transactions to chat backwards and forwards. Now, that's fine for doing something on the testnet or as an experimental thing. We actually had a hackathon in which some people did that, which was kind of great. But this person wanted to do it kind of in production and was going to create something in production that would then... And what happens is it then effectively just bloats the ledger, and every single node would end up storing that chat history. Which you don't necessarily want because it's just a waste of storage and not a particularly good tool for using the job. So there's certain things like that people have kind of proposed that people in the community have kind of said, no, please don't do that, just because it's not a very efficient usage of the storage and that sort of things. In terms of blockchains in general, our old employer IBM were doing a whole bunch of stuff with blockchains and being able to track lettuces on the blockchain and coffee and stuff like that. And there's I can see some value in that in terms of food provenance and safety and all that kind of thing. I think that's great. I think the big problem being is how do you ensure that the data is correct in the first place when it goes on the blockchain? Right? What's to stop me from saying, well, this is counterfeit olive oil or whatever, or and I'm going to just store that on the blockchain rather than the real olive oil. You kind of have to have the checks at the end of the blockchain. So the blockchain in and of itself is not necessarily solving anything potentially that can't be solved in other means.
The same problem as an NFT, essentially.
NFTs potentially. NFTs got some interesting cases. So there's NFTs are fascinating at the moment because there's everybody's kind of doing a whole bunch of stuff with NFTs, and the XRP community are doing stuff with NFTs. Ripple are doing stuff with NFTs as well. There was a show I had on a few weeks ago on the Twitch stream where we had some people minting NFTs on the XRP ledger.
That's quite cool.
Because I mean, so the XRP ledger was designed to allow you to tokenize arbitrary assets, like I said, bananas, shoes, coffee, euros, dollars. Well, an NFT is just one of them, right? There's only one of them, right? If you said that we represent dollars, but there's only $1 ever, then that's effectively an NFT, right? It's a non-fungible token. You take a fungible token and just create one of them. Well, it's effectively non-fungible because there's only one of them. So there's a little bit more to it than that, but you can effectively simulate non-fungible tokens with fungible tokens. And there's a standard that's been created by the community, the XRP community, to represent non-fungible tokens on the XRP ledger. And it doesn't need any change to the code base. It all just basically works. Then there's a further step that's going on in which people are looking to say, okay, well, what specific functionality could we add to the XRP ledger to make that a bit easier and make that a bit more performant and not end up bloating everything up so much? And so, there's people working on ideas around that as well to create actual specific NFT support as a first-class object within the database rather than reusing other data structures in the database. But yeah, I mean, the great thing with NFTs is everybody's playing around with them. You see, okay, so $70 million piece of artwork goes. There's all sorts of crazy stuff. People are kind of doing everything with them. But I think there's value in there. We just don't quite know where it is yet, right?
That sounds like everything to do with crypto. It's the fact that it starts out being a great idea, but where's the value?
Yeah, exactly. But I mean, you can see, okay, let me explain it to this way. Maybe we'll start to see it. So band fans, music fans, right? Mm-hmm. When you go talking, so I like that particular band, and your mate goes, oh yeah, they're great. The earlier stuff, I was at one of their first gigs, right? So your mate is a bigger fan or better fan than you because they were there earlier, right? That's the kind of, that's how music works, right? That's how music fandom works. The earlier you discover them, you're the bigger fan.
I knew them before they were cool.
Right, exactly, right? And it's like, okay, you might have an MP3 or even not even an MP3 nowadays, and a streaming, an entry on a streaming service for that song for you to listen to it. Yeah. And your mate's got the signed vinyl, right? It's the same music, right? It's the same content, but it's in different forms. And the signed vinyl is worth more because it's got provenance, it's got signature on it, it became early or whatever. Think about that in terms of NFTs, right? Now, imagine a band sells some NFTs of their artwork or of their music. Yeah. Anybody can still go to Spotify and listen to their music, but you're a super fan. You've got the NFT, the signed NFT from that point in time, right? And your NFT might be numbered number 1 and mine's numbered number 1,000. So you're the bigger fan than me because yours is earlier on. And you might think, okay, well, great. Well, what does that mean? So now imagine that the band now do a live gig and they say anybody with NFTs numbered under 500 get VIP access. Right, so suddenly there's a business model there in which you can use these non-fungible tokens to add additional value to other services that might not even yet exist. Right, so you've sold somebody this token that they might be able to redeem in the future. All right, so when if you've got the NFT, when you buy the album, you get a signed poster, or you get backstage access to the gig, or whatever it might be. And so an NFT could be a way of representing that in an independent way that's not tied to, say, Spotify or Amazon or whatever. It's an independent token that's not reliant upon you still paying your Spotify subscription. And if you stop, then suddenly your music all vanishes, right, or whatever, right? It's an independent thing that's portable and owned by you cryptographically.
Yeah. Okay, that makes sense. That's a better example than the ones I've had. However, that does lead me to the final topic, the one that I wanted to ask about, which you probably definitely know which one it's going to be. So we both know the Bill Bailey of databases.
Yep.
And his recent solo project, best way I think I could describe it, of Audio Taki, which is not actually solo, but Yes.
Yeah.
So this reintroduced me to the principle of web monetization, because I know the specification has actually been around for quite a while.
Yeah.
But for me, had zero value to actual implementing anywhere. And then talking to Metzen, he showed a real there is value in it, and Coil and services like that are helping.
Yeah.
What is your take on web monetization? And do you think things like the XRP ledger are the best way of supporting that? Because I personally think web monetization is great for skipping, not having to have bloaty ad blogs and music and stuff, and actually, but still providing value back to the people creating the content.
Yeah. So yeah, exactly. So web monetization it's a particular standard, and it's now a W3C draft standard to do with allowing effectively browsers to stream payment over the internet as content is coming down. So the idea of this is, you're watching a film or reading a news article or whatever, and the time at which you are spent engaging with that, your browser is literally streaming up, a thousandth of a penny or a hundredth of a penny or whatever every second that you're engaging with it. And Audiotarchy's project, Simon Metzen created that for bands to allow them to put their music on, and I can't remember the exact figure it is, but it's you get a quid or two for an hour's worth of streaming music to the content creator, right?
Yeah.
So the idea of that is twofold or threefold possibly. One is it's been very difficult to have micropayments online. The reason being is that typically payments are done by credit cards. Credit cards have a minimum payment fee. So if I make a payment with a UK debit card, it's 30 pence plus 1%, say, or whatever it is for the transaction fee, which means it's impossible for me to make payments of less than about £5 economically, right? Otherwise it just gets, everything gets eaten up in the fees. So I have to pay for things in sort of £5 chunks. And that means that, so if I go to, say, the Guardian website and they say, do you want to subscribe? They bring up a sort of a nag wall to kind of say, please subscribe and support our journalism. I've got to get out my credit card, type in the numbers or copy and paste them in from LastPass, whatever, and buy my subscription there. And then I have to do the same for the New York Times, and then I have to do the same for Spotify, and then I have to do the same for this and that, and that.
Yeah.
Now, the idea behind web monetization as a standard is that if your browser can stream payment, then it can do it independently to any of these services, and you don't need an account with them, right? And that can the current way of which free content is delivered at the moment is via advertising. So if I go to a website and it's free, there's generally adverts there, and basically the advertisers are paying the site owner to put the adverts to sit in front of my eyeballs, right? So that I see that advert and hopefully I go and buy their product, whatever it is, right?
Yeah.
Now, the problem with that being is that the more the advertiser knows about me, the viewer, the better they can target the adverts. So the more the adverts are worth, right?
Yeah.
Me just looking at a website, if they know nothing about me, they don't know whether to give me an advert for lawnmowers or crocheting or baby food or whatever, right? Now, if they know that I'm based in the UK, I'm 40-something years old, I'm male, I'm this, whatever, they can build a profile about me and say, okay, the chances are he's probably going to be more interested in lawnmowers than crochet needles, right? Or for a random example. So they can make more money the more they know about me. And if they can get my browser history and link it to others' websites and everything, then they can get an even better picture of me because they know, okay, you've visited this motorcycle website, so the chances are you're interested in motorcycles, so we're going to give you an advert for a motorcycle and hopefully you buy it, right? So the more they know about you, the more valuable they are, which means they've got to track you. So there's all this incentive to basically track you and basically invade your privacy and learn as much as they can about you to build the biggest picture to get the most advertising dollars in. And web monetization basically completely breaks that down and says, okay, get rid of all of that. Instead of being paid by advertising, we're going to actually pay by subscription, right? And some people say, but wait a minute, why should I pay for content when it's all free anyway? Well, a lot of people would probably say, I'd be happy to have no adverts for £5 a month. I'd be happy to have no adverts, right?
And I pay a pop-up blocker for that exact reason.
Exactly, right? Now, £5 a month, might seem like, okay, that's not a huge amount of money, and that's something I'd be willing to pay for to have no adverts. But I need it to be transparent, and I need it to go to all of those different websites, and I don't need to have to sign up to each and every individual one separately. And that's where the web monetization standard comes in. And that actually came out of some work. So there's a company called Coil that's started by Stefan Thomas, who is the CTO, used to be the ex-CTO of Ripple. He was also an early Bitcoin developer. Again, he created the Bitcoin JavaScript library, Bitcoin.js. He created one of the first What is Bitcoin videos that sort of introduced a lot of people to Bitcoin a decade ago. And he joined Ripple, was the CTO of Ripple for a while, left Ripple, started Coil, and this idea of web monetization. Now, web monetization under the hood uses a standard called Interledger. Again, Interledger also spun out of Ripple as well. There's a lot of connections here. Interledger is an independent protocol to move value between blockchains so that you can send something from Bitcoin to somebody on Ethereum, right? And Interledger is a way of interfacing between those things. Now, where it's used mostly at the moment is for services that want to have a kind of blockchain agnostic way of accepting payments. And so that's what web monetization uses. So the idea behind web monetization is your browser can send payments and they can turn up at the other end in Bitcoin, Ethereum, XRP, whatever the user wants. All they have to do is specify the payment, what's called the payment pointer, and it will deliver it. And you'll have effectively routers on the way that will exchange the currency as it traverses this network of nodes to get to the end destination, right? Now, XRP happens to be what's used most in the Interledger network and with Coil because it is so fast and so cheap to transact. So if you were using something like Bitcoin or Ethereum and the fees are so high that it just wouldn't work, right? Lightning Network on Bitcoin, kind of a similar approach and does try to make things a bit faster and cheaper, but is still, there's still a lot of rough edges around that. But that's why XRP is used a lot in this sort of scenario, because it is so cheap and so fast to transact on there.
Okay. That makes complete sense, because we had the conversation earlier with like the fact that it naturally flows through the ledger when translating between the different books, for it's coffee to banana to shoe to
exactly.
Okay,
and what's interesting as well with say Coil and with all of this is, so Audiotarchy, you go to Audiotarchy and it says if you want to support your artist, subscribe via Coil, you go to Coil and you give them your credit card and pay a £5 a month subscription, and they will then pay via the web monetization on your behalf. The artist at the other end, they configure their what's called payment pointer, which points to their cryptocurrency wallet, but they can have a payment pointer for different currencies. So they can have a payment pointer for, say, euros or pound sterling. So what happens is that the payment goes from my subscription in US dollars through the network, ends up in your wallet in pound sterling as the content creator, but along the route went through XRP. Because that's the cheapest way to convey that value. But then at the final endpoint, it's converted to the currency that you want. But what's great about it is you have all of these people doing this, and nobody even knows that there's cryptocurrencies in the back end, right? If they go to Audiotarchy, they would have no knowledge that it uses any of this weird magic internet money or blockchain or anything. All they know is that they go in, they put in their credit card to this company called Coil, they have a subscription, now they can use Audiotarchy without Simon's robotic voice coming on, interrupting you with adverts kind of thing.
I'd pay for one of those ads, to be fair. It'd be hilarious.
yeah, exactly. So they've got no idea that there's anything happening cryptocurrency wise. What's interesting is there's the initiative that funded Audiotarchy, I think called Grant for the Web, funded about 100 projects all around web monetization. And if you look through them, not a single one of them mentions XRP. because as far as the people developing concerned, they don't even realize, they don't even know that there's XRP being used in the back end. And that's one of the interesting things, is that XRP is potentially almost a victim of its own success in that regards, in that if it's completely successful in doing what it needs to do, which is to allow information to flow as easily, money to flow as easily as information, then you don't even know how it's being transacted. Right? It's completely transparent. So you don't even know that XRP is being used, in the same way that I don't know how the data that is traveling between my screen, my webcam and your screen, and your webcam and my screen, I don't know whether that's going over Virgin or BT, or whether it's copper or fiber or a satellite link or a microwave tower, or IP over Pigeon or whatever. Right? It's getting between us, and I don't care. And that's the same thing that's happening with web monetization, is that you don't really care. It's just the value is being transacted automatically, and if it reaches its goal of doing that, you won't even know that it's XRP underneath, which again slightly makes my job a little harder in that regards, because people say, well, what's XRP being used for? And I say, well, look at all these projects. They go, but it doesn't say anything about XRP. They're not using XRP. It's like, well, yeah, they are, but you just don't necessarily know it because it's at the lower levels.
Oh, does that mean that eventually you're going to be able to draw a direct comparison between the XRP ledger and, say, DNS? Nobody talks about it. Everybody knows it's used, and it is this thing that glues everything together.
Yeah, exactly.
Technically, that's a great thing when it's become that ingrained, but people just accept it for being there.
Yeah, it's like there's a company out there somewhere that manufactures, I don't know, water pumps that enable water to come out of my tap when I turn it on in my bathroom, right? Now, that company has value, shareholder value. That company generates revenue from selling, pumps or equipment or pipes or whatever it is to do water. But I don't even know that. But they have value. They're generating value there, even if I'm not aware of it. And it's kind of a similar thing to I think what's going to be happening with XRP and with, possibly cryptocurrencies in general, that people will start using them, and yes, they add value and generate value even if you're not aware you're explicitly using them.
Okay. Right, we're nearly to an hour and a half. Bloody heck, I've kept you around for a long while.
Right.
Is there anything else you'd like to point out before I go through the outro stuff?
No, I don't think so. I think, like you say, we've covered a lot here. I think
we definitely also went tangential from the list of stuff that's up there.
One might even say off topic. Well, no, I think we stayed on. Yeah, maybe. Yeah.
Oh, there's a little bit of off topic. Off the topics we listed, it was still on the rough topic of crypto and development around it, which I'm not going to lie, I knew a little bit about. I feel a lot more educated, and I'm very grateful for you talking us all through it.
Yeah, no problem.
Okay, so I believe I'm going to drop this into the chat. This is the best way of getting a hold of you in general, isn't it? Use your Twitter, which is Hammertoe.
Yeah.
I don't understand that, especially when somebody then decided to put into Twitter earlier a picture of a toe. When I said
so Hammertoe came around, I'll tell you about it. Another little off-topic bit. So Hammertoe is a phonetic corruption of my surname Hamilton. And so, so what happened was I used to work in about 1995, 1994. I worked for a small ISP in Albany, New York. And I used to do tech support for them. That's what originally got me into kind of Unix and stuff like that, doing tech support for this ISP. Used to have, big banks of physical modems with cables all plugged in, and, people dialing up 2400 baud modems, stuff. Anyway, my username was M Hamilton. Mm-hmm. And then, but that's 9 characters. And we used an operating system called BSDI, which is a derivative of BSD. And they kind of upgraded to some brand new Sonos 4 boxes, some SparkStation 20s, which were like top of the range at the time, $20,000-$30,000 servers. And they only supported 8-character usernames. So everybody's usernames got truncated to 8 characters. So my M Hamilton became M Hamiltoe. And when I used to walk in the morning, the guy I worked with there was like, it's Mr. Hammertoe. And it kind of stuck and became Mr. Hammertoe. And then, so my username originally was, this was on IRC, was Hammertoe. And strangely enough, it's not taken on any social media networks.
I wonder why.
So I went for it. And everybody's like, so is there something up with your feet? It's like, nope, nothing to do with that at all. It's just a phonetic corruption of my surname. So yeah.
Okay. Well, I'm pretty sure everybody knows how to Google for Ripple and Ripple Dev to actually look them up.
Yep.
That this is the Python library that was released very recently, and you went through earlier this week. So if you are a Python dev, you can now monkey around with, using the faucet. Now that I know that is a thing, to actually build your own applications that interact with the ledger.
Yep.
And on the topic of that, this is the Twitch channel. Is it every Tuesday you do this? 11 a.m. Pacific time, which is 7 p.m.
7 p.m. UK
GMT?
time.
Yeah.
So BST at the moment, 7 p.m.
BST.
BST. Yeah. 1800 UTC. So that's every Tuesday, and I get on various people from in and around the XRP ecosystem to come on and talk about what they're building. Right. So it's a technical orientated talk session, and we kind of get into code, sometimes do some live coding, see what's up. Last week, yes, we had Mayuka doing a fantastic demo of the Python library. Before then, had Simon Metzen talk about Audiotaki. Before that, we had the JavaScript library. So yes, I'm not sure. I won't say what's coming up on Tuesday because I'm not sure they're confirmed yet. But it might be in relation to XRP and Ethereum working together. So
nice. So if you're trying to find this, it would be twitch.tv/RippleXDev. And we've given the time there already. So you should definitely go check it out. I checked it. It was actually really fun. And I'm even going to try and convince Matt into letting me go on later for building some random crap on the mud, which I'm actually looking forward to dragging you into.
Yeah. That's I'm looking forward to that. It's going to be fun.
I always like learning by building things that are fun that actually have a purpose, though. It's always more fun to do. Like building games are always more fun than building a to-do list.
Yeah, exactly.
But no, thank you very much for joining me, Matt. It's really enjoyed the conversation, and I will drop you into the back screen and talk to you in a moment.
Yeah, great. Well, thanks a lot, Mike.
Thanks very much. And I only have one more thing that I need to share with everybody, and that's from my Fusion-y stuff that I have to do. And that is the fact, I'm just going to double check I've got all the details correct. That would be a yes. There are still spaces for the pure JavaScript Web Components workshop in April 27th to 28th. Details are at Eventbrite. If you want to get some more details, go to thefusionhub.co.uk. And that is that. So thank you, everybody, for tuning into the podcast. It's been really, really great. As always, I have learned stuff and my head hurts just a little bit because that's a lot of information and a lot of analogies and a lot of stuff to process. So thank you, everybody, for tuning in, and I will see you all in the next one.